Emily woke early that Saturday morning, as she often did. The sun was barely peeking through the curtains, casting a soft golden glow across the kitchen. She moved through her daily routine with practiced ease, grinding coffee beans, setting out plates and silverware, and preparing a light breakfast. Her husband, Mark, was due to wake up soon, and she wanted everything to be perfect. Today was special. Mark's sister, Laura, was coming for a visit. Emily had always felt uneasy about Laura's visits. Laura, a vibrant and confident woman, often seemed to overshadow Emily's quieter demeanor. Despite this, Emily had always tried to put on a brave face and play the role of the welcoming sister-in-law. When Mark finally emerged from the bedroom, looking groggy but affectionate, Emily greeted him with a smile. They exchanged a few words about their plans for the day and about Laura's visit. Mark's excitement was palpable, and Emily tried to share in his enthusiasm, though she couldn't shake off the knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Laura arrived right on time, as punctual as ever. Her entrance was marked by a loud ring of the doorbell and an exuberant greeting. Emily opened the door, forcing a cheerful smile despite the wave of discomfort she felt. Laura swept in with a big hug, and Emily could smell the faint trace of perfume and the unmistakable scent of her sister-in-law's high-energy personality. The day started off well enough. They shared breakfast together, and Emily did her best to engage in conversation. Laura, with her easy charm, dominated the discussion, recounting recent travel adventures and work stories. Emily listened politely, occasionally contributing when the conversation turned towards safer, neutral topics. The tension, though always present, was held at bay during breakfast. It was only after the meal, when the three of them moved into the living room for coffee, that things began to unravel. Laura, who had always had a habit of making herself at home, started to take over the space. She casually rearranged the furniture, something that Emily had carefully positioned just the way she liked it. As the morning wore on, the conversation shifted to a topic that always seemed to be a point of contention: Mark's and Laura's childhood memories. Laura had a knack for bringing up stories that made Emily feel like an outsider, and today was no different. She recounted an anecdote about how Mark had always been the favorite, with Emily being portrayed as an afterthought. Emily felt a pang of frustration but managed to keep her cool. Mark, oblivious to the subtle discomfort brewing between his wife and his sister, laughed along with Laura's stories. Emily forced a smile, her thoughts clouded with a mix of resentment and resignation. By midday, they decided to take a walk to the park nearby. The day was bright, with a gentle breeze rustling through the trees. It seemed like the perfect opportunity for a fresh start. Emily hoped that the change of scenery would ease the tension and allow for some genuine bonding. The walk was pleasant enough at first. Laura chatted animatedly, Mark responded with interest, and Emily trailed behind, attempting to engage in the conversation. However, as they walked, Laura made a comment about how Emily should take more time for herself, implying that she was neglecting her own needs in favor of her duties as a wife. Emily felt a familiar sting of inadequacy. She had always felt that Laura's remarks were intended to undermine her, and today was no exception. Mark, caught up in his own thoughts, didn't seem to notice the growing discomfort between his wife and sister. The afternoon passed with a series of polite but strained interactions. They returned home, and Laura suggested a game night, a favorite pastime of hers. Emily agreed, though she was already feeling mentally drained. As evening approached, the atmosphere at home seemed to shift. Laura, who had been in high spirits all day, began to exhibit a more subdued demeanor. She was quieter, and her once cheerful disposition seemed to be replaced by a thoughtful, almost somber attitude. Emily couldn't quite place the change but hoped it was a sign of improvement in their strained relationship. Dinner was served, and Laura took her seat at the table with a reflective look. The conversation was minimal, consisting mainly of polite remarks and brief exchanges. Emily could sense that Laura was preoccupied, but she tried not to let it bother her. After dinner, they decided to play a board game, as planned. The game started off light-heartedly, but soon, the competitive spirit brought out more than just playful banter. Laura, who had always been fiercely competitive, took the lead and began to dominate the game. Her remarks became sharper, and her demeanor, though still seemingly cheerful, carried an edge. Emily, feeling the weight of the day's interactions, struggled to maintain her composure. She was tired, both physically and emotionally, and the added pressure of Laura's remarks only intensified her stress. As the game continued, Emily's attempts to stay positive began to wane. The game eventually concluded, and Laura, still in high spirits despite her loss, suggested a tour of the house. She was interested in seeing the renovations Emily had been working on for months. Emily, eager to showcase her work, led Laura through the rooms, all the while trying to keep up a facade of enthusiasm. It was during this tour that things took a dramatic turn. As they reached the staircase, Laura, who had been walking slightly ahead, suddenly stumbled. The stairs were steep, and Laura lost her balance, falling down several steps before coming to a halt at the bottom. The sound of her fall echoed through the house, and Emily's heart raced as she rushed to her sister-in-law's side. Mark, hearing the commotion, came running from the living room. His face went pale as he saw Laura lying at the bottom of the stairs, groaning in pain. Emily was already on her knees beside Laura, trying to assess her condition and provide comfort. "Laura, are you okay? Can you hear me?" Emily's voice was trembling as she tried to keep Laura calm. Laura's responses were disjointed, and she seemed dazed. Mark immediately called 911, his voice filled with panic. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance as paramedics arrived. They took over, carefully examining Laura and preparing her for transport to the hospital. Emily watched in helpless silence, her mind racing with worry and confusion. As the paramedics carried Laura out, Mark turned to Emily with a look of disbelief and anger. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice strained. "I don't know," Emily replied, her voice breaking. "She just fell. I was right here, I didn't do anything." Mark's eyes were filled with a mixture of concern and suspicion. He seemed to be struggling to process the situation, his mind jumping to the worst possible conclusion. Laura was taken to the hospital, and Emily and Mark followed in their car. The ride was tense, filled with a heavy silence. Emily's thoughts were a whirlwind of anxiety and guilt. She kept replaying the moment of Laura's fall, desperately trying to find any clue that might explain what had gone wrong. At the hospital, they were greeted by doctors and nurses who quickly took Laura into surgery. Emily and Mark were left in the waiting room, where the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Mark's earlier concern had given way to a more troubling emotion, suspicion. He stared at Emily with a look that she could not ignore. "Did you push her?" Mark's voice was low but filled with accusation. "What?" Emily's eyes widened in shock. "No, of course not. I was right there. I wouldn't either." Mark cut her off, his frustration boiling over. "Emily, I don't understand what happened. I need to know the truth." Emily felt a surge of panic. She knew she had to convince Mark of her innocence, but the look in his eyes made her feel like her words were falling on deaf ears. The hours that followed were a blur of waiting and uncertainty. Laura's surgery lasted longer than they had anticipated, and the stress of the situation was taking its toll on both of them. When Laura finally emerged from surgery, she was in stable condition but still unconscious. The doctors assured them that she would recover, but the road to recovery would be long. Emily and Mark were left to navigate the murky waters of their relationship, strained by the day's events. As they sat by Laura's bedside, Mark's demeanor remained distant. His earlier accusations had created a chasm between them that seemed impossible to bridge. Emily tried to explain her side of the story, but Mark remained silent, his eyes fixed on his sister. The days that followed were filled with tension. Emily and Mark's interactions became increasingly strained, with Mark's suspicion casting a long shadow over their relationship. Emily felt isolated and helpless, unable to clear her name or mend the rift that had formed between them. Laura's recovery was slow but steady. She was eventually able to speak and began to piece together her memories of the fall. Emily hoped that Laura's account would clear her name, but the situation remained fraught with unresolved tension. In the end, it was Laura who played a pivotal role in mending the fractured relationships. Once she was able to fully grasp the situation, she spoke to Mark, offering a perspective that helped him understand Emily's side of the story. Laura, though initially disoriented and confused, eventually confirmed that she had indeed lost her balance and that Emily had not been responsible for her fall. The resolution came slowly, as Mark began to see the situation in a new light. The accusations had taken their toll, but the truth eventually brought a measure of relief. Emily and Mark's relationship began to heal, though it was clear that the events had left a lasting impact on both of them. In the end, Emily learned to navigate the complexities of her relationship with Laura and Mark, finding a new sense of resilience and understanding in the face of adversity. The experience, though painful, had brought to light the deep bonds that held their family together, and the journey of healing became a testament to their enduring connection.